My first question, you've done a ton of anime, but you've also done a ton of video games. And I know that there's a lot of differences between doing voice acting for video games versus anime. So I guess if you could go into sort of the differences between the two experiences.
Yeah, certainly. Well, for instance, anime dubbing is one of those processes where you have all the animation already complete for you. Unlike pre animation, which is fun too. Pre cartoons where you do like group record most of the time, and you can basically drive the performance at whatever pace and style you like. Very freeing. Anime dubbing is very technical. It's very meticulous, which I think is a fun challenge personally. I think you'll see a lot of really strong actors that began and trained in anime will then move into other forms of animation and do amazingly because they essentially trained with weights on and then were released and came out strong, Goku style. Where prelay or a lot of other forms of recording, you just get to drive whatever performance you want, and you have to fit it into this tiny little box. You have like this small little time period, and it has to start when it starts and end when it ends, and the lip flaps have to match what's there, and the big vowels have to hit with the big mouth movements or it comes across awkward. So you have to do all that while still keeping it honest, still keeping it grounded in a believable performance, and for you to still be invested in the moment. So it's kind of acting multitasking. You're still putting yourself there, you're still going through the emotions, you're still living as the character in that moment, but also this heightened level of being aware of I have to stop at this point or put a pause here, and it's a very much a collaboration between you, the director, and the engineer.
Okay.
Video games, for the most part, unless it's like an imported game like a lot of Japanese RPGs, will have moments that are dubbed like anime or cutscenes where you are very specific there. And then if it's a Japanese game, sometimes they have you loosely match timing. So it's not quite as, you can only fit it into this small space. It's more like you can fit it into like this kind of small space, Get it within a half a second of the length of time of this pre-existing Japanese file, listen to it, then try and match the length. Most video games don't have that. You can control the performance however you want, and you and the director work together just to give a good read. However, in video games, it's a lot more in a much shorter period of time. You just have long scripts with sometimes no context or very little context that kind of just jump around. And so that's more of like an intense, crack your neck and, all right, let's do this kind of a session, and you just kind of have to barrel through. Few sessions, if you're lucky enough, you get the chance to work with other actors, and mocap projects are great because those are more on camera style. You do full scene blocks, and it's a lot of repetition of those scenes until they get the right coverage they want. And of course, you get to work with other actors, which has a really great energy dynamic. But video games, usually it's just you solo in the booth, cranking through lines, playing off the director, and creating out of a vacuum, which is always fun. So.
Awesome, thank you.
No worries.
So was voice acting something that you just knew ever since you were a kid you wanted to do, or how did you really become interested in it and lead to wanting to pursue it in the future?
It's something I was always fascinated with. It was never something I thought that I could really do. When I was very young, I grew up with a bad stutter. And so I went through a lot of years of speech therapy, and that was one point where I was like, I'm afraid that stutter will creep back up again. And then as I got older, I got into art and illustration, and of course video games and cartoons, because I'm a huge nerd. So something I was always fascinated with, but never thought it was something I could actually get into, or I had an option to pursue. And as I got into theater and performance arts and stage, I got a little more comfortable, a little more confident, and began to find that I really was drawn towards the performance arts more than any other form of self-expression. And then I had the opportunity to do some background voices in an anime back in 2000, 2001. Through some strange coincidence, and my dad being an audio engineer at a post house who met a guy who's also a musician. They jammed together and found out he directed anime. It was long, weird, silly thing. Anyway, I had the opportunity to do an hour of background voices, like, hey you, or, guys dying in the background. I was like, this is the coolest thing in the world. I kind of like this. And they called me in to do background voices every 6 months or every year. Very spotty, little things here and there, just enough to kind of whet my appetite. And then about mid-2000s, I started to book more work with them and began actually getting more character roles and working on bigger video game projects as well as some anime. And I was like, well, I'm still young and don't have the responsibilities of a family and a mortgage and all these things that make it harder to take really big risky maneuvers in your life. Let me try for it. So I saved a little bit of money, quit my day job and got a really tiny studio apartment in North Hollywood. Lived off ramen for a while and just networked and trained and did classes, workshops, got out there and pushed really hard. And it was a very creative lifestyle for a while. I call it creative lifestyle. But after a while, started to actually get some good traction, got a good agent, and it just kind of built from there. So that was my journey.
Cool. So I'm actually working on a book on cosplay due out later this year.
Oh,
now,
very
you've
cool.
done a number of characters that are very popular cosplay subjects. So I'm just curious, as a voice actor, sort of an industry person, what was your initial reaction the first time someone dressed up as Chrom or Leon Kennedy came up to you and was like, oh, like, I'm such a huge fan. Like, what is that like?
Well, it's for one thing, it's very humbling and impressive. When a character that you're that attached to, that you've been through the process within a project to record, and you have that kind of personal investment in it, and somebody else took a lot of time and money and energy to recreate that and essentially embody that character, you can't help but have an immediate kinship. So you're like, oh, you like them too. You know, it's a connection point you can't ignore, and it's very flattering, especially if they bring it to show you, because then it's almost like you feel like a papa, and then look what I made, and it's like, that's amazing, it's so cool. And this is a funny note, I don't know if you're aware, but before I ever did any of this professionally, I've been going to cons since '97 as just a con goer. Like I said, huge nerd. I was pretty involved in the cosplay community in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And I was one of the, it was like forum member number 103 on cosplay.com. It was very tiny. And yeah, I mean, I made quite a few costumes myself back in the early 2000s. So cosplay was a hobby that I was heavily invested in for a number of years.
Have you ever considered cosplaying one of the characters that you voiced?
I've thought about it. A little part of me was like, is that weird? Is that a little too like, is that like almost just...
A little too meta?
Kinda.
Nah.
I don't know. It's one of those things where if a costume were provided, I would do it right now. And the reason I don't do it anymore is because I love the hobby. And most of my best friends to this day I met through the cosplay community. It was a wonderful time in my life. But when pursuing this career, it's a very expensive and time-consuming hobby, and I had to focus on my career. So that's kind of when I let it go, was to pursue this. And I don't have time anymore to do that. Mm-hmm. Plus the bar is so high now. People do such amazing work. I'm like, I was just with a heat gun and some Central Plastic. Yeah, what's this weird Sculpey armor stuff? It's amazing. So if I'm at the point now where I follow a few fans, I'm like, if you make a costume and bring it to a con, I will wear the crap out of that. But I don't have time to make anything myself, unfortunately. Sure. Halloween's like my one jam a year where I'll go all out. So
awesome.
But cool. I love it. I personally do.
Awesome.
So are there any other, parts of the entertainment field that you would want to be a part of, maybe like behind the scenes production or on-screen acting? Did you ever want to pursue areas like that?
It's one of those things where, especially as a what you call it, creative, or as a person who lives in that industry, you kind of have to pursue everything, because you never know what's going to bite. And you never know how long your current burst of work will last. Feast and famine is definitively the term used when it comes to being a person who makes their living creatively. I've done a good amount of on-camera work. I've done a lot of web series. I've shot 3 features last year, and we have 2 more coming up shooting this next year. But on-camera stuff isn't something I really actively pursue, just because voiceover is where my heart lies. It's where, to me, that's the most fulfilling. It's where my background is. It's what I love. I'm a hardcore gamer, and cartoon aficionado, so that's where I live. But on-camera stuff is a lot of fun too, and it's an interesting experience, and I'm getting dragged into it more and more. So I'm just kind of keeping that balance. Production standpoint, I've been directing and producing web projects for a number of years. I had a web series in 2009 I did called There Will Be Brawl. That was a live-action film noir kind of HBO crime drama version of the Smash Brothers Nintendo universe. And I also directed 3 shorts a couple years ago called School of Thrones. That was kind of like a parody of Game of Thrones, but in like a John Hughes 80s high school film type way. And we have a musical that we kickstarted last year called Muzzled that we're in post on right now that should be launching in the summer. So I do some production work, and I enjoy elements of it, but every aspect is its own time-consuming structure, and which was much easier to do when I was just fledgling in my career. I'm at a point right now, for as long as it lasts, that I'm busy enough doing voiceover work primarily that I can't focus a lot on other projects right now, which is both frustrating and also a blessing. But as soon as that work begins to wane for a bit, and I'm sure it will anytime now. Then I'm just going to jump back on that production train to stay busy, because I'm one of those people that needs to always be busy.
So, about the voice acting industry, obviously almost everyone works as sort of like a freelancer.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I guess, how does that work, really? I mean, in terms of, you seem to be constantly on other projects these days, but, I mean, how difficult is it really to sort of, kick down the door and get into the industry and at least get consistent work?
Right. I'm not going to lie, it's not easy. People have asked, they've told me, like, oh, I see what you make. That's a lot of money. I'm like, well, consider the fact, it'd be a lot of money if I was being paid 40-hour weeks.
Right.
Yes, but we're being paid in like 2 to 4 hour chunks, maybe once every week or two, depending on who's working enough, And when you do the math on that, you see, oh, that's really not a whole lot for a lot of folks out there. So, and it's a very competitive industry. When you consider you work, an hourly job that pays a certain amount, you're like, okay, that's a decent paycheck, but you have a paycheck waiting for you at the end of every 2 weeks. We have to do the work first by constantly auditioning, going out there, meeting people, networking, being available, moving our schedule around before we even book anything. Anytime that we're not in the booth recording, we're constantly trying to find the next gig. So we're always working at all hours. So imagine working those 2 weeks, and then at the end, you have to re-interview for your paycheck. That's essentially how being an actor is. Where you already put in the work, and then you're now up against 100 other people for that paycheck every other week. So, yeah, it's a really interesting career to choose, and you have to be ready for a lot of rejection. I consider myself doing pretty well right now, but even so, I'm maybe booking 1 out of every 50 things I audition for.
Wow.
And it's just how it is. And it's not necessarily a question of who's better than who. A lot of projects, they get a lot of talented people submitting, and there's just the one person that's kind of what we were thinking of. And so you can't take it to heart. You just have to understand that constant rejection is just because there's a large sea out there, and not everyone knows what they want. And if you're lucky enough to be that one person that has that sound they like, then you'll get it. And if you don't, just keep pushing to the next one. So for those who are wanting to go into the industry, first and foremost, you have to train as an actor. Voice is great, and voice training and mic technique and being familiar with that is a really important skill set on the back end. But the core of it is that performance art experience, and I can't recommend more theatrical training on stage, improvisational technique and improv classes, learning character study and scene study. When you read a script, you're like, oh, this character's doing this. What you learn in these classes are things like, that's cool, take that character, what are they really trying to get out of the scene? What's the subtext to their arc in this sequence? What were they doing before the scene started? Where are they going after the scene started? And you just construct this whole world around this one scene, and that's what gives it the depth and the life that really makes it a believable moment in time, because there's so much more to it that goes beyond the words that are said in that scene. And those are the things you learn and just naturally begin to pick apart from scripts through these training exercises in these classes. So all that training comes together to make you a great actor. Then to pursue voiceover, I recommend you pursue many things beyond voiceover. Voiceover is a facet of it, because once again, you never know what will take off.
Sure.
Also within voiceover, you can't be like, I want to be an anime voice actor.
Right.
Because you're going to be really poor all of your life. Because in voiceover, there's so many subsects. There's Western cartoons, there's anime dubbing, there's video games, there's promo, there's commercial, there's audiobook narration, there's industrials. These are all facets of voiceover, and you want to pursue them all. Because there are times where I have friends that are very talented voice actors that won't book a video game for a year. But they did enough book narration jobs and enough industrials to support them in the meantime. That way they didn't have to get another secondary job and lose out on the ability to be flexible and do other auditions. So if you want to pursue it all. Train and learn as much as you can. Don't limit yourself. And be ready for a lot of rejection, and don't let it get to you. Because a lot of people come out to LA or New York to pursue it. They get 6 months in and they're like, I can't deal with the rejection, and they go back home and give up on the dream. And that's fine. If you can't take it, go. It makes it easier for us. Less competition. But if you really, really want to get it, you really want to take it, push through it, do what it takes, and really hit it full steam ahead. And that passion, that will to learn, that will to pursue and continue is what's going to help you persevere. A very long-winded answer.
So you play Captain Levi in Attack on Titans, which is a very popular anime. So when you auditioned for it, did you know about the big fandom? Were you intimidated at all? And who else did you audition for, if anyone else?
Okay. I was not aware when I first auditioned for it. I had a feeling, because the Anime Expo, before the auditions came through, I kept seeing everyone dressed up in this like uniform. Like, what is this uniform? It's like everyone. This is crazy. And maybe in Japan, only the first 6 or so episodes had launched at that time, so it was still fresh from a Japan standpoint. People were already all over it. I was like, what is this show? And then about 6 months later, Mike McFarlane from Funimation sent me the auditions. And I was like, okay, this is that thing. Cool. And I read for Aaron, Irvin, and Levi, which is funny in itself because every script ended with, like, the volume just got more and more intense because it was part of the project you needed to hear people scream and see how good they were at yelling because a lot of the show is screaming and yelling. So I'm sitting there at like 11 p.m. in my apartment auditioning, yelling, I will effing kill you! You know, like over and over again before I realized, my neighbors are being very quiet now. I'm going to go talk to them and be like, I'm a voice actor, I'm sorry, I'm just auditioning. Like, okay, cool, just glad. We thought we'd have to call the police. I'm like, good, okay, yeah, we got this taken care of now, we're fine. But I read for those 3 guys, sent them off, and while I was waiting to hear back, I was like, I should probably watch the show, give it a couple episodes, and get a feel for it. So I find it online or on Netflix and just sit down and watch the first 2 episodes. Smash cut to 9 hours later. I'm still on my couch, my blanket around me. This is so good. There's only 1 season? What? No! So I was already hooked on it at that point, and then I heard back that I booked Levi, which was consequently my favorite character in the show after watching the first season, so it was a big nerdgasm internal cartwheel at that point. So I was pretty stoked about that, but still didn't quite realize how big the fandom was. And then I went to my first convention where they had started announcing the voices, and it got real daunting real quick because so many people were dressed up and so many people were at these panels and so many people were just curious and everyone had the kind of that gleaming glare of don't mess it up. Okay, no pressure. But we took a lot of time and a lot of effort to give the show the best we could because we knew how important it was to a lot of people and kind of what was riding on it. And I personally loved it myself just from a fan standpoint, so I wanted to make sure that I did the best I could to respect the original source material and do the best I could. And the production team did the same, so we're proud of it. We're very proud of it.
I want to talk about another character that didn't really take off until after the fact, which is Chrom from Fire Emblem.
Yeah.
Fire Emblem has always been huge in Japan, but didn't really seem to take off in America really until Awakening came out. So
pretty much.
I'm curious, was there any sort of expectation that Fire Emblem Awakening was going to blow up the way that it did when you were recording?
No. My introduction to Fire Emblem was the original Smash Brothers. I was like, who are these guys? What? But then I actually, being once again a nerd, I looked up some fan translations and emulators of like some early projects, and I'm an RPG nut, so I have an illness where if I don't level up something or like upgrade equipment in something for a week, I start getting the jitters. It's bad. So I was familiar with it before going in, but I knew it didn't have a huge following here in the U.S., but I was just excited to be part of a Fire Emblem property.
Sure.
Like, yeah, that'd be awesome. And had a fun time recording it. It looked beautiful. The story was great. The writing was really on par. And as the game came out, everyone kept saying how amazing it was, and they got all these great reviews. And I was like, oh, cool. And then the convention started seeing just this huge swell of following for Fire Emblem. And I was like, oh crap! Okay, that's really cool. Then I had a lot of requests for like proposal videos. Which I had memorized now. After you do that proposal many times and get a lot of questions about it, and I'm playing through it still. Once again, free time. Especially this month with like Bloodborne and Pillars of Eternity coming out, and Witcher 3 around the corner. I want to play all the games. But yeah, I wasn't expecting to get as big as it was, and I'm excited for it. And I got called in to record on Smash Brothers, the new one, which having made that web series 5 years ago, and then now being in Smash Brothers, I was like, oh, that's weird. I'm only in there a little bit, but we recorded the trailer for the Smash Brothers one. It was one of those, I walked into the session, and I didn't know what it was yet. They're like, that's for Smash Brothers. Nice! You're not really in it. Oh, okay. but the writing was funny for the trailer, and like, they kind of play into the joke that Chrom kind of wants to be in it, but isn't needed.
Right.
And to be fair, they needed more female characters in there anyway, and I felt that like, the choices of Lucina and then Robin being able to be male or female, I thought was a really cool way to kind of fill out the roster. And against them at all for it.
Sure.
Although I would like to see possible DLC down the road. You already have the model in there, why not? But yeah, I'm really proud of that game, and I'm hoping there's opportunities to bring Chrom up in future stuff. We shall see.
Awesome.
So do you have a favorite character out of all the ones you voice act? I know it's probably hard.
Oh, that's a hard choice. With each character you prepare, you anchor a part of it in yourself to kind of give the performance that connection, that believability. So even like villain characters that do despicable things, there is a portion of their personality that you find some similarity with yours, so that you can branch from there and give it that honest point of connection. So every character I have a connection with on some level, and it's kind of hard to choose. The one that I feel I connect with the most, just because we're most similar, would be probably Leon Kennedy from Resident Evil. I have a habit of being that kind of sacrifice myself for the greater good, even if I shouldn't, because it's stupid and doesn't make any logistic sense. Why survive, you stupid kid type? But I'm to a fault that kind of Boy Scout personality, which I get walked over a lot by a lot of people, especially in LA, which is the town that has the people like me alive. So thankfully, I have a girlfriend who's much more of a gritty survivor and defends my honor. But and I'm generally bad with women, which Leon also is, so that works out well. But no, Leon definitely I connect with very strongly, and I loved him before that. I played all the Resident Evils up to that point, so to step into those shoes was a huge honor. Also daunting for the same reason as Levi. But yeah, he's probably the one I connect with the most. But from a personality standpoint, I really enjoy Alvin from Tales of Exilia. Because, I don't know, there's something about that kind of lax, kind of mercenary with a heart of gold type feel that's just, I don't know, it's fun. It's like how I'd play a bard character in D&D, you know, just that full of charisma, but also the underlying subtext of, I don't trust this guy. I'm like, yeah, you probably shouldn't.
We've seen you at a few conventions so far this year. MagFest, KatsuCon, I don't know if you had done anything since Katsu, but you're at a lot of conventions now as a guest. So you mentioned you were already going to conventions since the late 90s. So how weird was it for you to go from regular cosplayer, con goer to featured guest?
It's weird. It was really interesting because I spent my own hours waiting in line to go to panels to watch voice actors talk, and to be on the other side of that it was enough of a transition where I didn't notice as it was happening per se, and then one day I went, whoa, how did this occur? It was very cool, it was very interesting. It's also a little daunting. That word gets used a lot here, you'll get the theme arriving. But it's been wonderful, because for me, part of what inspired me to continue to pursue this was being able to talk to the actors that I looked up to, and now I have the opportunity to hopefully reach out and inspire other people to do the same. And really, when it comes down to it, that to me is what's so fulfilling about this job. It's not so much like, I get to be in cartoons, that's cool, that's part of it. But I think as an archetype, as a personality archetype, as performers, we're storytellers. As writers, you're storytellers. As directors, you're all trying to tell a story, and you use the actors and the prop artists and the set designers, and we're all instruments to tell this story. And so we're just a facet of that, but a facet that tends to get more attention, strangely. So to tell these stories, I feel that we're kind of the new elders that would tell the fables to the younger kids. We're the ones who help deliver these tales of heroism and being a better person, and hopefully inspire the next generation to aspire to be better people through these video games and these cartoons, and on some subtle level, you know, not giving us this grand scheme of like, we are in charge, but like, I like to think that there is some merit to what we do in the fact that we help people be better people. I know I did. I grew up modeling myself after many video game characters and cartoon characters that I admired and adored, and felt like I would love to be more like that guy. And that changed me for the better. So if I have any opportunity, I've at least changed or touched one person with what I do to be a better person, and maybe even pursue this field as well, then I've done my job, and I can die a happy man. So being able to transition from being that person who was inspired to be a person who is inspiring is a huge honor, and I hope I don't mess it up.
So you were just talking about a little bit about your inspirations. Do you have anyone in particularly that you were like, I want to be like that guy, voice acting wise or career wise?
When I was very young, I was very inspired by Mel Blanc, who was the voice of every Warner Brothers character ever, pretty much, even some of the ladies. He was Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Yosemite Sam, Sylvester the Cat, Tweety. He was. When you look at all the old Warner Brothers cartoons, it says voice characterizations, Mel Blanc. That's it. He did them all. And so I remember in 4th grade, I did a book report on him. We were supposed to do a biography on someone we admire, and everyone had to choose from the list because no one really wanted to do biography. Like, oh, I'll do Abraham Lincoln. the canned responses. I did Mel Blanc. And so as a 4th grader to walk in there and read and research this man, I was already kind of on the track of admiring his work. And sadly, he passed in '88, I believe, so I never had the opportunity to meet him. But his work still stands on its own. Since then, I've been inspired by the likes of Steve Bloom, by D. Bradley Baker, all the directing work that Andre Romano does, and being able to work with these people now is crazy. It's really wild to admire someone so tremendously and then to get to know them personally and be able to work alongside them is nerve-wracking at first. My first session recording for Thundercats, I walked in there with Warner Brothers lot, and it was Andre Romano directing. I was in the booth with Kevin Michael Richardson, Will Friedle, D. Bradley Baker, Corey Burton, and we had to go back and record the first episode later because you could hear how nervous I was. But they all made me feel super comfortable, and it was wonderful past that fact. But it was just so crazy to be working with them. Jim Cummings came in and worked on an episode, and I love his work from Darkwing Duck and Minsk and Baldur's Gate and all these other great properties, and I just totally fanboyed out on him. I was like, hi, nice to meet you, Mr. Cummings. I gotta go, you know. So, yeah, it's wild, and pinch myself every day, really. No point do I ever want to not appreciate what I have right now for as long as it lasts, because who knows.
Now, besides, I know you've got, you're doing the voice of Jotaro in Stardust Crusaders. Is there any other big project for you coming down the pipe later this year that you can legally talk about?
Legally talk about's the key.
Yeah.
I have a handful of really, really cool projects coming up and characters that I'm really excited to talk about and really proud. But I can't talk about them yet.
Okay.
It kills me. But soon, hopefully. I know recently I was able to announce Pillars of Eternity just came out, which is kind of the spiritual successor to both the Baldur's Gate series and Planescape Torment. And I love that. It's those old PC RPGs. And I voiced 2 of the player characters in that game, and that was really cool to be part of that. Aloth and Adair. And then it's coming out pretty soon. I don't know when that this would go up online. I don't know how soon you plan to publish any of this.
Next week.
Okay, that should be fine. April 2nd, they're releasing the next Hearthstone expansion, which is the Black Rock Mountain. And I had the opportunity to voice Ragnaros and Nefarian, the 2 main villains in that,
cool.
who were 2 bosses that I used to spend countless hours raiding against when World of Warcraft first came out with my guild. So having Chris Metzen, the Papa Warcraft, choose me to take over characters that he voiced and work with him on that recording session was also a huge honor. So that'll be coming out pretty soon. By the time he publishes that should be. I got to work recently on a project with Ian Sinclair at Funimation that he directed. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
Ian Sinclair directed it, and it's an existing property in a new season, and I really love the character I got to portray. Also, there's some cool games coming out, right? Arkham Knight looks cool. Should probably play that one. Yeah.
Okay.
Skirting the line already. Pull back on that.
Sure thing.
Okay. Well, I was just gonna say, what are some of the other things you're interested in outside of voice acting?
I really love tabletop role-playing games. I've been dungeon mastering since high school, and I've been running a 2-year Dungeons and Dragons game with a bunch of other voice actors: Laura Bailey, Travis Willingham, Liam O'Brien, Sam Riegel, a bunch of other great folks. And we recently got found out, I guess, word got around in the industry somehow that we were playing this D&D game. And Felicia Day contacted me and we had a meeting, and we just started streaming it live on the new Twitch channel. So every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific time, we do a show called Critical Role, where it's just us playing Dungeons and Dragons for 3 hours every week. And so that's been a fun experiment to try, and it's gone over really well. So if any of you guys have nothing to do on a Thursday night, you want to come watch a bunch of us voice actors roll dice and be super nerdy, we're on the Geek and Sunday Twitch stream. But yeah, I love games, love role-playing games. I also play some miniature war games, painting little minis of creatures I fight with. Big nerd. Other than that, I love hiking. I love getting out to nature and kind of detaching from all that every now and then. So those are the ones that come to mind. Did you close the question?
I'm good. Thank you.
Cool. Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.